We're up to Daf Samach Daled. The Mishnah is going to raise the question of the credibility of the father to testify with regard to his daughter in three different possible ways. Number one, that she is Mekudeshes, that he married her off. Number two, that she's Megureshes, he received a get on her behalf. And that will have implications as far as whether she can marry a Kohen. And Shvuya, which once again will have implications as far as whether she can marry a Kohen. So the Mishnah reads as follows. Kidashti Espiti, a father claims that he married off his daughter, which he can do when she's a Ketana. Or he says, Kidashtia v'gerashtia, I not only married her off, but I received a get on her behalf, Shehi Ketana, and now she's a Ketana. So therefore, even now, as he speaks, he could be Makabel Kiddushin or Gerushin for her. Harehi Ketana, right now she's a Ketana, is now and he's believed. And therefore, if he says that he was Makabel Kiddushin, she has the status of an Eshes Ish, no one is allowed to have relations with her. And if he says that he received her Kiddushin, but also a Gerushin, then she can no longer marry a Kohen. But if the father says Kidashtia v'gerashtia kishehi Ketana, when she was a Ketana, now at this moment Harei Gedola, then he's not believed. He cannot claim now when she's a Gedola that when she was a Ketana, he married her off. He's only Neman because right now he can marry her off. And therefore the implication is that she can marry anyone, including a Kohen. Now, what about Shvuya? If a father says about his daughter, Nishbes, she was taken captive, Upadisia, but I redeemed her. And the Rabbanah made a takana that a Shvuya is not allowed to marry a Kohen, as it says in the Gemara Ksubas on Daf Chav Beis, and we know based on the Sugin Yevamos Samach Ches that a woman who had a relationship with a guy is no longer allowed to marry a Kohen. So bein shehi ketana ubein shehi gedola eino neman. Even if she's a ketana, she will be allowed to marry a Kohen, and the father is not believed. And the Gemara is going to explain why. Maishna Reisha, Maishna Seifa. Why is the Reisha we grant ne'emonus and credibility to the father with regard to his Ketana, his Bas Ketana, to testify that she's a Grusha, which would mean she can never marry a Kohen. But with regard to a Bas Gedola, he's not believed to say that when she was a Ketana, he received her get, and therefore she's Psul Lakuna. And he's not Neman, he's not believed to say about his daughter that she was a Shvuya, and that matters not whether now she's a Gedola or even if now she's a Ketana. And the Gemara answers. We're going to see one answer, and then Abai is going to take us in an entirely different direction. The Gemara answers Reisha, in the case of the Reisha, where she is still a Ketana, and therefore Biadei, her marriage and divorce are both in the hands of her father, he could be Mekadesh her, and he could also collect or receive her get, and therefore he could pass a lakuna. And therefore he's always Neman, because if he's lying about the past, then right now he could passel her for kahuna by marrying her off and receiving her get. So basically it's called biyada, and there's a separate nemanus of something that's biyada, which you can do and effectuate now. But b'seifa, she's already a gedola, lav biyada. He cannot be Makadisha or accept her get because she's a Gedola. She's out of the rishus of her father. She's already past 12 and a half. And therefore, we might suspect that he's lying. And therefore, he's not Neman, he's not believed to say that she was taken captive amongst the Goyim, by the Goyim, even if now she's a Ketana, because he can't make her into a Shvuya. So the concept or the application of the rule of Biyada doesn't apply with regard to Shvuya. So what the Gemara is basically saying is that the father is believed to testify about his Bas Ketana to Pasel Hala Kahuna by saying that he accepted her get, because now that she's a ketana, he can marry her off and accept her get. So he has the ability to pasel her for kahuna, and therefore he's believed to say that she's indeed psul kahuna. The Gemara asks the following question: V'lo, are you telling me that a father does not have biyado? He doesn't have the possibility of generating an iser of kahuna and making her into a shvuya? V'arei biyado l'asiyah l'chol. He can make her into a psula by, again, if she's a katana, marrying her off to a cholol. And a cholol is someone who was born from a relationship that, from a perspective of kahuna, is illegitimate. For example, let's say an almana marries a kohen gadol, and the Torah prohibits that in a lav. The child from that marriage is called a cholol. And if this cholol is married off to a Jewish girl, then kopasel lakuna, then she becomes psul lakuna, because a bas Yisrael that's married to a cholol becomes a chalol, and she has the same status, the same din as a shvuya, who is psul lakuna, who cannot marry a kohen. So therefore, in the case of a ketana, the father should be believed to say that she's a shvuya, because if the father wanted to pasel a kahuna, he has the power, it's biyado, to marry her off to a cholol. And the Gemara has now a whole long discussion about this. Holo kasha, the Tana of our Mishnah holds like Rabbi Dostoi, Ben Yehuda Diomar, Benos Yisrael mikveh tahara lechalol, that when you marry off a cholol to a bas Yisrael, then the psul of chalolus does not pass on to the daughters of this marriage. They are allowed to marry a kohen. And later on, the Gemara Daf Ayin Zayin is going to explain that anybody whose daughter is allowed to marry a kohen, bito muteris li nase lakuna, when he dies, even his wife is allowed to marry a kohen. Since the bas is not a cholol, or I should say chalol, therefore her mother, his wife, is not a chalol. So again, since the bas of a cholol, who was married to, the daughter of a cholol, I meant to say, was married to a bas Yisrael, and she is allowed to marry a kohen, so to the almana of the cholol is also allowed to marry a kohen. That's the logic of Rav Dostoi. So it comes out, according to Rav Dostoi, that even if the father would marry off his daughter to a cholol, he would not passel her to kahuna. She can still marry a kohen. Why? Because she, like the almana, in a case where her daughter would be ksher lakuna, because bas Yisrael is a mikveh tara l'chalolim, so too the almana, the mother of that daughter, is not pasel lakuna. So even if he would marry her off to a kohen, she doesn't become psul lakuna. Therefore, the Tana Mishnah holds that a father cannot be believed to say that his bas was a shvuya, because he can never, it's not biyodo to pasel lakuna. So Gemara immediately asks, "V'arei biyodo l'asiyah l'mamzer." But the father has the power to marry off his daughter to a mamzer. Of course, he would not be allowed to do that. But if he did so, then the marriage would be chal, because mamzer is only a chayvei lavin and not a chayvei kari. So therefore, there would be tfisas Kiddushin. And as a result of this marriage, she, being married to a mamzer, is psula l'kuhuna. She can't eat truma. And therefore, basically, she has the status of a shvuya as a result of the fact that her father married her off to a mamzer. And again, even though he's not allowed to do so, but nevertheless, once he does so, there's tfisas Kiddushin. And since the father has the power to marry off his daughter to a mamzer, and therefore pasal lakuna and for achilas truma, why shouldn't he believe to say that she's a shvuya? It's already biyado. And the Gemara answers that our Tana of Mishnah Rabbi Akiva holds like Rabbi Akiva, the Omar, who holds in Masechet Yevomis on Daf Mem Tes, Ein Kiddushin Tosim b'chayvei lavan. So therefore, the father cannot in any way effectuate a kinyan Kiddushin from his on behalf of his daughter to a mamzer, because even though it's only chayve lavin for a bas Yisrael to marry a mamzer, nevertheless, Rabbi Akiva holds ein Kiddushin tosa b'chayve lavin. So this marriage would never be valid, and therefore the father doesn't have the other to passel his daughter from kahuna, and therefore he's not believed to say nishbes. So the Gemara raises the following objection: Hare, even according to Rabbi Akiva, biyad l'asiyah, he has the ability, the father, to passel halakuna. In what case? In the case of almana l'kohen gadol. If, let's say, this katana was married and then divorced, and now she's asura be'isur lav to a kohen gadol as an almana. If her husband dies, she's an almana, and a kohen gadol is enjoined from marrying an almana with an isur lo saseh. But in this case, even Rabbi Akiva would agree that Kiddushin Tovsin ba, as we're going to see in the name of Rabbi Simai. And I believe that the underlying premise or principle here is that this is only an Isur Kahuna, and the Isur of a Kohen Gadol to an Almana is not Shava B'Kol Nefesh. It's not something that goes beyond. So it's a limited kind of lav, and Rabbi Akiva's modeh that in such a lav there is Tfisas Kiddushin and there's no Mamzeris. And let's see, the Sanya will see the Brisa of Rabbi Simai Omer. Minakol Osa Rabbi Akiva Mamzer. In other words, Rabbi Akiva holds that in all cases of a lav, ein Kiddushin Tovsin, and the vlad is a mamzer. Chutz mi almana l'kohen gadol. Here, the vlad is not a mamzer. And Rav Simoy is going to derive this from a pasuk. But again, I think the logic behind the pasuk is that it's not a lav hashav b'kol. Sharei Omer Torah, with regard to marrying, getting married to a kohen, the Torah makes the following restrictions. Vayikra Chof Aleph, Parasha Zema. Almanu grusha v'chalol v'zonov ela lo yikach. And immediately in the next pasuk, it says, V'lo yechalil zaro bi'amav. So we're going to darshan the smichus hapsukim, and we're going to derive from this that a kohen gadol who marries an almana, because he's included in the Isra almana lo yikach, is chilulin hu oseh v'eino oseh mamzer. That as a result of this marriage, he could create chalolim, and the children of this marriage of an almana l'kohen gadol are mechulalim upsulim lakuna, but the children, although they are psule kahuna, they are not psule kol, they are not mamzer. So even though through this marriage there was a violation of a lotaseh when the almana married a kohen gadol, nevertheless the children of that marriage, as we derive from the pasuk chilulim hu osa vein osa mamzerim, are not mamzerim, and therefore if they're not mamzerim, the Kiddushin is tofsin. So if a bas ketana would be married off as an almana to a kohen gadol, the father could effectuate a status of a chalol. And therefore, when he says, the father says that she was nishbasa, she was taken into captivity, he should be nema because he has a migu, or a biyado to be more precise, that he could have married her off as an almana to a kohen gadol. So the Gemara answers, Ki Rabbi Yeshevev, that our Mishnah reflects the understanding of Rabbi Akiva of Rabbi Yeshevev. To Yomar, how did Rabbi Yeshevev understand Rabbi Akiva? Bo v'netzavach al Akiva ben Yosef, that Akiva ben Yosef, we have to scream and protest, he's being marbe psula b'Yisrael. Shahoya, because Rabbi Akiva Omer used to say, Kol she'en lo bia b'Yisrael avlad mamzer. Any person who violates an Isur Torah by having relations with a woman, the child is automatically a mamzer. Any violation of a lav is considered like an erva, and the child is a mamzer. So therefore, in the case of almana l'kohen gadol, which is a violation of a lav, ein lo bia b'Yisrael, therefore the vlad is mamzer, and therefore there's no Kiddushin Tovsin, and therefore he cannot pass a lo lakuna, and that's why he's not believed to say that she was a shvuya. There are two ways of understanding Rabbi Yeshevev. One way is to understand that Rabbi Yeshevev was explaining the shita of Rabbi Akiva Shapir, then our Mishnah makes a lot of sense, and it can be reconciled because the Nesui Almana L'Kohen Gadol, from which the child is a mamzer, and for that matter, any biasura generates a vlad who's a mamzer, that would apply in any biasura, even in an Isra Aseh. We'll soon see examples of an Isra Aseh. And therefore, we can explain our Mishnah that in Kiddushi Avera, the Kiddushin is not chal, and therefore the father has no way of marrying off his daughter to someone who would be machal hol kahuna with his bia, because there's no possibility of tfisas Kiddushin, and therefore he's not neman to say that she's a psula, like in the case of shvuya. Okay, so that works out well. Ella e, but there's another way of understanding Rabbi Yeshevev, and that is that he wasn't saying it as a separate halacha, but rather lafuke mitaymed Rav Simoy kasi. He's coming to reject the understanding of Rav Simoy in Rabbi Akiva, and he wants to tell us. And again, when I say he, we're talking about Rav Yeshevev, that even in the case of Nesui Almana L'Kohen Gadol, the children are mamzerim. And even though the Torah uses the language chilul, it's possible that only been asuin in this marriage that there's a violation of a lotas, that the children are mamzerim and there's no tvis Kiddushin. But in general, as far as nesuin with a violation of an essay, then the Kiddushin would be chal. And now we're stuck with the following question: according to the second understanding of Rabbi Yeshevev, of lafuke taima de Rav Simoy, because Rav Simoy was limited to a violation of a lotas, whereas according to this presentation of Rabbi Yeshevev, we're expanding Rabbi Akiva even to an essay. Then according to that mahalach in Rabbi Akiva would say that bo nitzaveach, that kol she'elo bia b'Yisrael avlad mamzer, even in a case of a chai v'yesei. For example, if a Mitzri becomes a ger, or if an Adomi becomes a ger, then for 3 generations past the gerus, they are also b'Isra aseh. And this is derived from the pasuk in Parshas Ki Teitzei, lo tesayev Adomi, lo tesayev Mitzri, bonim asher yildu lehem dar shlishi yavo lahem v'kal Hashem. So before the dar shlishi, there's a violation of an essay of bia l'kal Hashem. So it's only a violation of an essay. And a lava b'mechal essay is an essay. And therefore, the children of these gerim are not mamzerim. And therefore, the Kiddushin would be tov simba. But even though they're not mamzerim, but nevertheless, they are psulei kahuna, and they're also to eat truma. So if he can marry them off to a chayve essay, like a ger mitzri adomi at shlosh doros, then he can pasal halakuna, and therefore it's biyado. He should therefore be neman to be believed to say that she was nishbeis and she's psul lakuna. And based on this, we come to a new approach to understand our Mishnah and to explain why the ne'emanis of the father does not extend in the Sefer of our Mishnah to the case of Shvuya. We're rejecting the first approach that the ne'emanis of the father is machmas biyado, because we've come to the conclusion that he has biyado lepasol lekuna through chavi esei, based on the second interpretation of Yesheva. Rav Ashi is going to come up with a new explanation. B'tizvara, are you able to maintain that that the Mishnah is based on the question of biyado, is Reisha? In the case of the Reisha, where the Reisha of the Mishnah says that he's believed to say that Bito Megureshes, the father is trusted to say that he received a get on behalf of his Isha, you're going to say it's Mishum to Biyadahu, that he has the power to divorce her, Even though the father was granted by the Torah the authority, the ability to be Makadesh, his daughter, but not Legarsha, because it all depends on the Baal. The Baal could decide whether or not he wants to be Megarisha, and then the father will indeed receive the get on behalf of his daughter, who's a Ketana. But nevertheless, the Ikar Gerushin depends upon the Baal. He'll make the decision. He's in the driver's seat, not the Av. So why should the father be believed to say that she's a Grusha? Where's the Biyado Legarsha? It all depends upon the Megarish. And furthermore, it's difficult. Even the Kiddushin is not to be understood. Ilu Omar Hai, if that person who's possible would make a declaration, Lo Nicha B'Gava, I don't want to marry this woman, is Mimotzi Makadish Nila Balkorche, he can't force anyone, the father can't force anyone to be Makabel Kiddushin and to be Makadish. So Memela, neither Kiddushin nor Gerushin are really Misurim B'Yad Av. There's no B'Yado here. And therefore you cannot explain that the underlying reason why in the Reisha the father is believed is because of B'Yado El Omer of Ashi. We have to offer a substitute explanation for the Reisha and the ability of the father to testify on behalf of his daughter. And the answer is, the Reisha is talking about a case where she's now currently a Ketana, and Rachmana Himne. The Torah says that we believe the father is Biti Nasati Lishazeh. How do we know that the father is believed single-handedly to testify that his daughter is an Eishes Ish, and Emar, as Biti Nasati Lishazeh, Leish Asra. And Hazeh he tira. Right? He's nema on the father to say Espiti Nasati lo ish, and that generates an Isra Kol Olam. And for example, we don't know who is Makadisher. And when the pasuk continues and says Hazeh, then the father is pointing to this particular individual. And he's saying that I married off my daughter to this individual, and he tira, and now she can marry anyone after she gets a get, obviously, but she can marry anyone else on the face of the earth. In any event, we see clearly that the Torah believes the father to generate an Isra on his bas. However, this only applies where the Torah applies it. And the Torah says, as Biti Nasati in the parasha of Kitana and Nara, the Torah never gave or upgraded the father's testimony to that status of Nemanus with regard to Bito Agdola, if she's already a Bogeres. So again, in the Reish of the Mishnah, B'Nesuin, the father says that he married off his daughter who's a Kitana or a Nara, or the father says that he's Makabel Gerushin on her behalf, is Hemnei Rachman Aliyah. The Torah trusts and relies on the testimony of the father. But B'Shvuya, Lo Hemnei, we don't find anywhere that the Torah believes the father to establish and testify that his daughter was a Shvuya. That's why in the Sefer, the father is not believed to say that she's a Shvuya, and it doesn't matter whether she's a Gedola or a Ketana, he's not believed. And now we're up to the Mishnah towards the bottom of page Samach Dal. And we're talking about the nemonis of a person to say that his wife will require Yibum after his death. Misha Amar B'Shas Misasa. He's Notelamus, and on his deathbed, he says, Yeshli Bonim, my wife will not need Yibum because I have children. We don't know where these children are, but he has children. Neman, he's believed. However, if we have reason to believe that he has no brothers, and therefore, if there are no brothers, there's no Yavam, and therefore she doesn't fall for Yibum, if on his deathbed he says, Yeshli Achim Enonem, I have a brother or two brothers somewhere on the face of the earth, and therefore you fall for Yibum, and you'll need Chalitza. He's not believed. Why? Because the Chazaka was that he has no Achim. On his deathbed, he's saying he has Achim, we can't trust him. So Gemara says, Alma, what do we see from the dinim that are formulated by our Mishnah? Neman lahatir, v'eino neman lesa. He can be matir his wife by saying that he has banim, and therefore she doesn't fall for Yibum. But he's not believed to generate an Iser in a case where we have reason to believe that he has no brothers, and he says on his deathbed, I have brothers. Nemo masnisin deloka Rabbi Nosson. If this be the case, our Mishnah is against the Brisa of Rabbi Nosson. Again, Rabbi Nosson's only one opinion in the Brisa. Tisanya, we learned in the Brisa of Shas, Kiddushin Omar. A husband says to his wife when he marries her, he wants to show her that it's a good idea for her to get married. He's an attractive suitor. So he says to her, Yeshli Banin, I have children from another wife, and therefore, in the event that I die, you will not need Yibum. But then the same husband who testified at the time of the Kiddushin that he has Banim, now B'Shas Misa, he says, Ein lo Banim. He changes the tune, and he says that you'll need Yibum because I don't leave any Zerah. Now we have another case. B'Shas Kiddushin Omar, when he wanted his wife to marry her, so he said when he proposed to her, Ein lo achim, I don't have any brothers, and therefore even if I'll die, you won't need Yibum because there's no Yoma. And then B'Shas Misa, he changes his tune, and now he wants to say that she does fall for Yibum. Omar, he says, Yesh lo achim, I have brothers somewhere on the face of the earth, and therefore you need Yibum, and there's Zikas Yibum. Neman lahatir v'eino neman lesa. He's believed with regard to his first statement that he made at the time of the Nesuin, which is either Yesh lo banim or Ein lo achim, and that's going to be matir, but Eino neman lesa. But when he comes along and he changes his tune at the time of his death, and now he says you do fall for Yibum, we don't trust it. We accept his original statement, and we're going to have to understand why. Divrei Rebbe, this is all the Shita of Rebbe. And it's very possible that Mishnah reflects the Shita of Rebbe, and a person is not neman to testify b'shas misa that he has achim, and therefore she falls for Yibum. However, Rabbi Nosson Omer af neman lesa. The Baal is believed to create an Iser, meaning that she falls for Yibum by testifying that he has brothers or that he has no children. So our Mishnah could not possibly be reconciled with Rabbi Nosson because our Mishnah clarifies explicitly that the Baal is not believed to create an Iser for his wife. Amar Rava Shani Hasan. We can make a fundamental distinction between the Brisa, the scenario in the Brisa, and Rabbi Nosson, who says that the Baal is neman even liosra. Now again, the Chiddush, let's go over one more time, Rabbi Nosson, is that even though at the time of the Kiddushin he said, I have banim or I have no achim, and therefore you don't fall for Yibum. Nevertheless, Rabbi Nosson says he could change his tune at the time of his death and testify that he does have achim, or that he doesn't have any children, and generate an Iser Yivam L'Shuk. Says Rava, came into B'Shas Misa, Kahadar Be'ema Kushtakama. We have reason to believe that if he changes his tune at the time of his death, because he doesn't want to go to the next world and have it over his head when he gets to the Beis Din Shel Mala in the heavenly court that, hey, your woman, your wife, your almana now, she really falls for Yibum, and you're responsible for the fact that she went ahead and she got married to the shuk. He doesn't want to have that hovering over his head. So now he gets smart, and in order to clear his reputation, he says to her at the time of his death that you fall for Yibum. I don't have any sons. I have brothers, and therefore you fall for Yibum. So no Avera should be around my, like an albatross around my neck when I get up to the pearly gates. And therefore, says Rava, even Rabbi Nassan would concede that he's not believed now to generate an Isur and to say that she falls for Yibum, because the only reason he's saying now that she should fall for Yibum, because he has a brother, he has no children, is in order to make sure that there's no avon tolui bo. And therefore it's nira shedaito litzara, and he's not neman. Says Abaye, no offense, Rava, but you make no sense. Abaye says to Rava, V'lav kol dechunu, I'm going to set up a kal v'chomer. If in the Brisa Rabbi Nosson says that the Baal is believed liosra, then for sure, without a shadow of a doubt, in our Mishnah, how much more so would he say that she's believed that he, the father, is believed liosra? Why? Hashta. Let's look at it and analyze it. Uma hasam in the Brisa. Dikamara leila dibure. That at the beginning, when he married her, he said that she's potter from you. And now he's being makalkel his original statement that he made at the time of the Kiddushin. And he says that she's chayeves be'yibum because he has no children or he has a brother. And nevertheless, Amart, you still insisted that kushta kama, that we're going to believe him. And she's going to require yibum or chalitza at least. Is now I'm going to set up a kal v'chomer, says Abaye. He's not rejecting what he said originally. The father's not being makalkel his original dibur. He never patted her from yibum to begin with, and now he says at the time of his death that she's chayeves be'yibum. Lo kol shkein, certainly we should rely on him, and we should generate an isur. And therefore, if you're going to try to interpret our Mishnah in the light of Rabbi Nosson, says Abaye, you have to come up with another explanation. Elo Amar Abaye Masnisin, what's the case in our Mishnah? Dilo muchsak lan biyachi, dilo muchsak lan bibni. According to everything we know and all the information that we gathered, he has no brothers, which would mean that even if he has children, even if he doesn't have children, nevertheless his wife will not fall for Yibum because he has no brothers. That's called lo muchsak lan biyachi. The Amrinon, and now we're going to say, according to Abaye's new interpretation of Rabbi Nosson, that Keva de lo muchsak lan bibni v'lo biachi, since at the time of his death, to the best of the knowledge of our gathering of information, we don't know that he has children, but at the same time, we don't know that he has brothers. And therefore, she's not skukal yibum because he leaves no brothers. There's no yama. And therefore, Omar Yeshli Banim, when the father says that he has children and therefore she doesn't fall for yibum, he's basically reiterating or reestablishing or supporting the original chazaka that she's allowed to get married to whom she wants and she doesn't require yibum. She's not yivam l'shuk. Is therefore neman. But if he says yeshli achim, if he's telling us at the time of his misa that she falls for yibum because he has a brother somewhere and he doesn't have any children, and now he's taking the cheskes heter and he's being mafkia the cheskes heter and generating a cheskes isa to say that she does require yibum and she can't get married without yibum or chalitza. Eino neman. He's not believed. Why? She lav kol kmineti asar la kuli alma. He doesn't have the nemanus to establish an iser al kuli alma and to be mafkia the chazaka that she has a cheskes heter because lo muchsak lon bibni v'lo muchsak v'yachid. That even though maybe he has no children at all, but nevertheless, there are no brothers. So to be mafkia and to be sosa, that original cheskes heter, the father is not believed. That's as far as our mission is concerned. Now we get to the Brisa. Brisa, which records the machlokes between Rebbe and Rabbi Nosson as to whether the Baal is Neman. I'm sorry, before I said the Av, I think I mistakenly said the Av. Correction, the Baal. And at the time of the Kiddushin, he presented himself, as if, he's an attractive guy to marry because there won't be any Yibum. Now, at the time of his Misa, he switches his tune and he says, she's Chayeves B'Yibum. He has no children and he has a brother. And Rabbi Nosson says in the Brisa that he's believed. Why?